can get speakers down to front, if that's okay, 'cause try and sit in the chairs with the microphones, that's okay. And then we've got, I've got 20 odd minutes for questions. I've got a few myself. I just got one as we all sort of wander down. Corley, just more from out, you talked about protection marks on timbers.
Yes.
What are they? I know everybody else was asking that question. I just thought I'd say that, obviously.
Protection marks, yes. There have been rather more research projects in England on marks in buildings, really, on stone and on timber. But some of these surveys have recorded a lot of these taper marks,
Right.
often near thresholds by windows and over doorways and so on. And they are also known as apotropaic marks, which really means protection mark. Right. Some of us have heard of them as witch marks as well. Yeah. So essentially, they are interpreted as a protection against evil spirits or the devil or whatever. And they are prevalent. They are, now we've started to get our eye in, they are all over the place and even in quite recent buildings. In East Lothian, especially. Okay.
Well, we'll leave that question for others to answer that one. Is there any other questions? Is there any hands? It's all very silent. Oh, sorry. Do you want to?
Thank you. I was told that the wood in the at Humby in Keith Marshall came from Norway in the roof there. But that would be about 1580s, which perhaps a bit late for you. The Stirling heads in Stirling Castle were reckoned to be from wood that came from southern Poland and now in Ukraine. Again, that would be 1500 and something, would it?
Yes. The Stirling heads have been analysed by Anne Kroner, AOC Archaeology, and they are 16th century. They belong to the Renaissance Palace. They are 1530s. And they come from various places, well, the wood comes from various places in the Eastern Baltic. And they're more commonly what we see, that sort of board, high quality board, oak, is what is used for carving. And that's what we more often see from that part of the Eastern Baltic, boards that were used for carving. So finding structural oak from that region in St Mary's was really unusual. Keith Marshall, I had a look at Keith Marshall. The roof is built with conifers, and I think therefore, well, it could be. I didn't analyse it. Some of it could be 16th century. We start to see conifers coming in the late 16th century. There are bits of recycled painted ceiling in there, and those became fashionable in the late 16th century. Some others have been dated, but I haven't worked on it. There wasn't any oak there, so didn't do any work there.
Right, thank you. Can I try another question? I think you seem to have the earliest date was about 900 AD in the first list you had on the screen there. Going across the border, you've got massive pieces of wood in Vindolanda from the 1st century. Is it possible to trace back in the north England a straight line back to that date?
I was only showing you that part of the Scottish record, which is in the last millennium, basically. We do have sections of earlier tree ring record for Scotland, but they don't join up as yet. There are more continuous records, including from Northern England and from Ireland, which can be very helpful to us for dating.
Very interesting, thank you.
It's just a question for Angela.
Sorry about my ignorance, but how do you detect a prostate cancer in a skeleton?
Sorry, say that again.
Caught my attention. The prostate cancer in a skeleton.
What was your question, sorry?
You said, the slide said that this young man...
How did I identify it?
Yes, how do you detect?
Well, the prostate cancer would have been long-standing. It would have been a chronic condition.
and you see ossification in areas around the pelvis and the lower parts of the spine. It's actually likely to be one of the earliest examples identified in the UK, and he's to use Coralie's term, one of my favourite children, because the story is very sad. He was an old man, and the blow to the back of the head was a massive one. It was, it was that long, and it was so forceful that it cut the back of the head completely. So you saw the two fragments. Although there are healing on both of those fragments did not unite, and there was a good maybe 2.5 millimetre gap. As Alison mentioned, an injury in that location would likely lead to visual impairment. So you have the kind of image of this older man who had perhaps been a warrior, a fighter of some sort, who has survived this terrible injury, then got possibly blind, or certainly with impaired sight. Then he got prostate cancer, decided to make the pilgrimage down to the Isle of May, and didn't survive.
Fascinating.
So yes. Sorry, we go back to Ronan.
So a question for Angela. I just wondered if you think there's a potential bias in the kind of violence being preserved, because if you imagine a battle, would the losing side, would they actually be buried? Would they not just be left to rot in the field? So these are all victims someone has buried them, has taken the effort to put them.
Absolutely. Well, what you do have is you've got a clear distinction, obviously, between, for example, the two London Links burials who had normative burial. They were buried in Longkiss, presumably by their own people, after whatever occurred. Whereas the situation at Cramond is really quite different, because they've been buried without care, and they've been put into a Roman latrine. Although in a sense you could argue that perhaps mimics a Longkiss. The issue of where battle dead would have gone is of course a massive one, because it seems likely that the losers would have been left on the battlefield, and indeed finding the battle sites themselves is also difficult. Even though preservation is relatively poor in some parts of Scotland, for example at Thorney Bank, you would be amazed at what does survive. And there was an isolated case from Thorney Bank that I identified that was possible projectile from perhaps a crossbow, and one example from Lasswade. But clearly the issue of where battle sites are, how we locate them, and what happened to those individuals is a big issue. But certainly, as it stands, the osteological evidence is quite clearly saying to me, this is where the evidence is concentrated. What I want to do next is extend kind of geographically and chronologically, and because I've got this opportunity at the museum, I hopefully will be able to do that. But yeah, where are the battle sites? That's the massive question.
I think since you say about it, Cramond's quite unique because it's got two faces of it. The first, and we talked about this a few years ago, the first lot are, seems like almost like a crypt, proper crypt, so they're actually buried in the crypt. But the second one was certainly ruined, it was chucked,
Yeah, they were thrown in.
Very easy, but maybe there's something. How are we looking at different parts of society? You've got that, obviously you've got the cat stain, is dedicated to the king's daughter sort of thing, so I think the different sides of the community compare those.
Yes.
Certainly the ones we get,
One
the
of
light medieval ones,
One of the sad things about Catstain, the example that I found of violence was a 19th century skull. Preservation from the Catstain from the 1970s material is really, really bad. This led me to think about preservation more generally because the 19th century discoveries are much better on the whole than material that was excavated in, say, the second half of the 20th century, which makes you wonder about levels of environmental pollution, and there is something happening.
There's something odd happening to the stories that way. I think that's for something.
Well, that's another thing. While we're on Cameron, just
You want a date?
well, I want a radiocarbon day.
You mentioned chances. A lot of progress is there. Yeah. Open up his checkbook. Well, on that note, we've moved swiftly on. I've just got a little question for Christine, because she gave me a lot of trouble earlier on. Have you found any of the medieval and post-medieval, and why not? There's a trouble there. I know why.
We would like to. My instinct is that possibly in 1895, when they split the estate, I think the bit that we didn't get might have the medieval in it. We did find a small piece of pot which could well be medieval, but it was unstratified in a midden. Yeah, we've got such a good written record that there must be something, which is why we would like to do some more geophysics and see if we can track it down. But like I said, that hill on the other, just the other side, just calls to me.
Owned by the farmer. Sorry.
Hi, yeah, about CAMO as well. There's obviously a lot of building work going on sort of now in that area around CAMO. Is other things coming up in the sort of developmental work in the area sort of around the main estate that sort of is linking to the main house site that you've been looking at?
No. The site on the floodplain, what's the name? Next to it? Maybury Road. There's nothing being found there. Oh, sorry. There's nothing being found next to it on the sort of floodplain. It's hard to explain without a map. Any there. CFA be doing and AOC be doing a lot of work on the what we call West Craigs and Meadowfield farm areas, which is sort of on the ridge, and then going towards Edinburgh Airport. That's a story for another day, but not much in terms of anything to do with the estate, but lots of very interesting prehistoric and other archaeology. But another talk. I can see them in the audience, so I won't say anything.
Hi, just wondering about the skeletons. Has anything been published about the skeletons? Anything available?
Not yet. I only submitted last October, November last year, and graduated in December. But the plan is to submit a kind of summary article to PSAS for the next volume, with a view to publishing the entire thing. An ideal location might be perhaps the internet reports, the SARE reports, because I have a vast body of data that's being collected, but certainly there will be publications, plural. John and I are working on.
Yes, we are. Yes.
John and I are working on Cramond.
Long-term project, but no, and I need to get another date, so I'll push it back a few more months, he says. I will do that.
I was just wondering, has a report come out yet about Cramond, apart from the various articles in some magazines?
No, we did it's a long, we did a talk about it, and sorry, probably speaking loudly enough. We did a talk on this, and we did an exhibition. When was that? 2016. Thank you very much. There we are. I mean, that led on. That was an interesting project because we managed to find a little bit of money And thanks to a badger from memory, we actually got looking at the stuff before. But it actually brings up some of the questions that Alison brought, because we had it's a very odd burial. How can I put it? Well excavated, but some of the analysis wasn't well done. Can I say that? Probably. I just have at the time. And they missed a few things. And then we had lots of very interesting dates, and then one of them was covered in that glue and gave it a very weird date. So how do we spend some more money to get that done again? But what we talked about is just one of the huge backlog I've got to apologise for. But we want to do something on it because it's a fascinating story, and I think it really highlights. God, I can go on about Crammon as well, like calling for 20 minutes on Crammon. But effectively, I think we've got a possible church, and this is, I think, more to do with the Dark Age, Gododin or wherever they were, people at Crammond and a missing royal settlement site as well. So there's a lot of things that I just need to find time and have Ange berate me every now and again.
If I could just make a general point, the field of trauma studies, certainly in the past 20 years, has advanced really dramatically.
Yeah.
So, you know, no one is saying that the people that didn't pick up on this evidence earlier got it wrong. Our methods and the way that we can do things now are very, very different from what they were 20 or 30
I think so, yeah. And also, the way it was excavated, it was very confusing because it was very much, when they excavated it, it was excavated very well. Some of the records went missing, unfortunately. But also it was very much mixed up with a lot of medieval midden deposits which were dumped back into it. So there was very much a thought at the time, it was a lot later, and most of our focus on publishing the work at Crammon was on the Roman material and not so much on the medieval at that time. So that's why we're sort of looking back at it. And it gets back to about looking back at old collections, and actually with a fresh eye, new technology. We're working a lot, sorry, I'm taking over, but we're working a lot with Ange and others on, the Crick Institute going to look at a lot of our human remains, as we've done with National Museum, and it's really interrogating those sort of stuff. So lots of things in future. I'll shut up.
Hi, just a question for Christine. It's about CAMO. You mentioned plans to do further geophysical surveys of the estate. Just wondering, whereabout are you hoping to do them? Because I know quite a lot of it's been done.
We haven't done an awful lot, actually. We did a bit at the front of the house, and we did some at the outside the south wall of the walled garden. Mostly because these were the flattest bits. One of the problems is that there's a lot of wooded areas in CAMO that mitigate against geophysics, but we would hopefully be able to find patches where we could do some more geophysics around and see if we come up with anything. Most of the work that we've done so far has been based on map interrogation rather than geophysics. And I think we're drawing to the stage where we've completed that part of it, and the next will have to be looking at the geophysics record.
Retire for lunch. Just going to say, I'd like to thank all this morning speakers. And we'll see you all back here at 12:40. Thank you.